Recording in progress.
Is this going to be a little late in getting started?
Are we able to hear on Zoom?
Now we can hear audio now.
Okay, well, we're already finished with the meeting, so. We were taking a roll call, but should we start over for the benefit then of just Zoom?
I think just the participants here.
Okay. I just wanted to let everyone who is participating by Zoom know to please practice considerable etiquette when using Zoom and mute yourself when you are not speaking. And I just wanted to do a staff presenters roll call. So do we have Fire Chief Kirkhow on the line? And we have strategic planning consultant Scott has confirmed she is here in the chamber. Community education and risk reduction manager Gluhan. Or no? No, okay. And then emergency services manager BB is here. Programs planning grants manager Rendler. She's not on. Oh, okay, she's logging on. Technical analyst project manager Cronin is here. Here, thank you. Budget manager Morale.
Here on Zoom, thank you.
Thank you. Events coordinator Firewise coach Klein. That was Denise.
Sorry.
Marjorie Klein, are you in?
I'm here.
I see her on the list, but can't hear her. General Manager Logan.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy County Counsel Forbath.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Presenters, consultants, and staff are accounted for, and I appreciate everybody's patience as we, this is our first time doing a hybrid meeting, so a learning curve, but.
Definitely. Thank you, District Clerk Vargas. We will now move on to item 2, Commission President remarks. A reasonable question from those of you who regularly attend this meeting might be, something seems a little different tonight. Yes, for those of us who have become accustomed to 3 years of Zoom meetings, a little bit disorienting to be seeing everyone in real life. And if you think it's disorienting for us here, I want to point out that's even larger impact on the staff that runs this meeting. So we're one of the first organizations affected by the end of the Emergency Brown Act orders that allowed virtual meetings for the past 3 years. And for us as commissioners, we are back in sort of a pre-COVID Brown Act requirements to be attending in person, in public. And we'll talk about this later in item 13B, but that's just to explain to everyone why we are all here together for the first time in years. This meeting is also being held in a hybrid format tonight so that members of the public and other staff and attendees can continue to attend virtually. And this is a hugely complex technical feat, as you can see, for those of you who are here. And we owe quite a few thanks in order to make this meeting happen. Most notably, the town of Los Altos Hills and its staff members have been incredibly welcoming and helpful in making this happen. We really appreciate the town offering these chambers as a location. So thank you to City Manager Peter Pernijad and to the staff for holding our hands. And I'm talking to you, Deborah Padovan, for making this meeting happen technically. Thank you to you and anyone else who helped make this possible. Well, again, we'll be talking more about this later, but thank you. And we ask everyone's patience tonight as we go through. I expect speed bumps, and we will just put up with it and figure it out. So with that, it's on with the show. We'll move on now to item 3, public comment. Persons wishing to address the commission on any subject not on the agenda may do so now. Please note, however, the commission is not able to undertake extended discussion or action tonight on items not on the agenda. Items may be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on the next available agenda. District policy is to limit public testimony to 3 minutes per speaker unless the number of speakers requires the commission president to impose shorter time limits, which will probably not be the issue this evening. Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Yeah, I see Yoriko Kishimoto has her hand raised.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Yuriko. You have the floor.
Okay, yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Yoriko Kishimoto, and I am actually the president of Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And I am here at your first meeting to just introduce myself with, well, really with 2 hats on. One is as the Mid-Pen president, and so I'm looking forward to working with your district as well. And then second, I am the special district appointee to the LAHCFD. So I'm a LAHCFD commissioner, and I'm also on the committee that's overseeing the fire services study, which has been delayed but is back on track. So it's really just to say hello to especially any new members of the commission that I don't know or don't know me. To make myself available to you tonight or in anytime this year. So that's pretty much it. I know we have a next technical advisory committee for the fire services study coming up, I believe on February 17th, possibly, or that's coming up in mid-February. So I won't take any more of your time, but thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for introducing yourself to those of us here who don't know her. And if you don't, we are privileged to have Yoriko involved in any capacity and every capacity. So I'm so glad it's in multiple capacities now that you're working with us. So again, it truly is a privilege. Any other public comments? Seeing none, hearing none, giving extra time just in case, since they're looking at the Zoom stuff over on the other desk there. We will now move on to item 4, the consent calendar and changes to the order of agenda. Are there any comments from staff on these items? I believe there are.
Yes, so I have one comment. It's just a small typo on the agenda. As published, there are 2 item number 12CI. So that the item that is the update on the CWPP Annex 4, it should be item 12CII.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission on these items, or would any commissioners like to make changes to the consent calendar or the order of the agenda? Okay, I'll now entertain a motion. Will the commissioner making the motion and the commissioner seconding the motion please state their names for the benefit of the recording?
Warren moves to adopt the consent calendar and the agenda.
Sherlock seconds.
Thank you. So the item is now open for discussion. Any discussion from the commission? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this item? I'm hearing none.
Don't see any.
Great. If there's no further discussion, we'll now vote. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you. President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock,
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji,
Yes, but I abstained from 4A and 4B because I wasn't here for those meetings.
okay, Commissioner Basiji abstains from 4A and 4B because he was not present. Thank you. Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion passes 6-0 with one abstaining just on items 4A and 4B.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 5, public hearings on proposed abatement of hazards, weeds, brush, and rubbish. Let's see. General Manager Logan, could you please introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Board President Spreen. After consultation with County Council and County Weed Abatement personnel, I would like to request the commission consider not proceeding with the weed abatement hearing, item 5 tonight, but consider continuing the hearing and item 5A and B to the February 21st, 2023 regular commission meeting. This continuation is due in part to the change of location of the meeting tonight and the anticipated difficulties of traveling during the current inclement weather and storm events. In anticipation of the request for continuation of the weed abatement hearing, residents of properties on the weed abatement non-compliant list were mailed a courtesy letter notifying them of the proposed location and date changes. The letter is included in the agenda packet. If any member of the public are present for item 5, they will be allowed the opportunity to address the commission under item 5. Comments will be forwarded to the weed abatement division. And that's the end of my report. If there are any questions, County Council is here also that can respond. Thank you.
Okay, so at the February 21st regular commission meeting, any members of the public who would like to address the commission regarding the proposed abatement of hazardous weeds, brush, and or rubbish, or wish to contest their inclusion on the list of identified properties included in the agenda packet will be given the opportunity to appear and be heard at the public hearing. At this time, we will welcome comments from any members of the public who would like to address the commission on these items today. And if applicable, I will direct the district clerk to forward your comments to the Santa Clara County Weed Abatement Manager for follow-up with you offline. I don't see anyone present here, and I don't believe there are any online, but we will check. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion from the commission on this continuation? Seeing none, are there any public comments on these items, or any public who wishes to speak? Hearing none, then I believe that just do we need to vote on that, or is
Yes, so we will entertain a motion to continue the hearing to the February
Okay.
21st.
Okay, we'll now entertain a motion for continuing the hearing to the regular February 21st, 2023 commission meeting.
Warren moves to move items 5 to the February 21st regular commission meeting.
Vaughn second.
I second.
We have a second over here. Thank you. So the item's open for discussion. Is there any discussion from the commission? I'm expecting none. There's no further discussion. Oh, let's see. Any public comment on that? Hearing none. We will now vote. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct the roll call.
President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock,
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji,
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
And the motion passes 6-0 with one absent.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 6, fire chief reports. Now, do we have the fire chief present? Oh, great. So item 5A is the monthly report for November 2022, and item 5B is the monthly report for December 2022. Fire Chief Kirkall, please provide the reports.
Good evening.
Oh, Chief
President
Glass is doing it.
Spreen.
I'm sorry.
That's That's all good. Good to see everybody. It's good to see you back in person. Good evening, President Spreen and members of the commission, Brian Glass, Assistant Fire Chief, Santa Clara County Fire Department. Hopefully you can see that I am sharing my screen. This appears to be the December Public Safety Report. Let me see if I can switch it over to the November one. Let me see. I got to stop screen sharing here. My apologies. Here is November. Okay, November, kind of staying on track as we normally do. 78 calls for service in November, 43%, 43 of those calls, 55% were EMS related, service calls 20, which comprised about 25% of the call volume, fire alarms 8, which was 10%. And again, hazardous condition 4, these are your wires down, any kind of issues like that. And then of course, anything that gets called in as a potential fire gets listed in that category by count type. We did have a dollar loss in the $500 range. This was due to sawn lumber material at a residence that got hot and combusted. Homeowner put it out and extinguished it upon arrival. So again, it was just small pieces of lumber and plastic pipe that ended up during part of construction caught on fire. Again, response times looking really good in the month of November. We did have Engine 71 covering in the El Monte area. They were obviously responding code 3 in those events and made their 4-minute and 53-second response time to those calls. You can see Engine 76 was covering 16 times. So again, we had a lot of training going on in this month in November. So making sure that we're always covering El Monte Station, providing that service level to the constituents there in Los Altos Hills. With that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the November report.
Great. Thank you, Chief Glass. Is there any questions or comments from the commission? Seeing none. Or any public questions or public comment for Chief Glass? I'm seeing none. Great. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your being here.
No, you're very welcome.
Oh, December. I'm sorry, December 1. Rushing too fast here.
All right, we'll move to December. Let me work on the screen share for December. Okay, we finished out the year. Hopefully you guys can see that. We finished out the year strong, 104 calls in the month of December, which is a really kind of a spike or a peak. And again, I don't off the top of my head know what we can attribute that to. I'm not sure what exciting things were happening in December. But we finished the year strong, 947 calls. You can see this is above our average, but consistent with what we saw in 2018, 2019. Again, 2020, we were dealing with COVID, coming out of it in 21. So we're right back in the lane for a post-COVID year of 2022. Again, taking a look at the distribution, we had a decrease in EMS calls and an increase in service calls and fire alarms. So again, that's your distribution there and your pie chart. We had all of our response times look really good, except we had a rural response time average of 9 minutes and 33 seconds, which again, we got to do better on that. Those are attributed to multiple calls coming in at the same time. So we're having to send engines and apparatus from adjoining and outlying station areas. And $0 loss in the month of December. And here's the call volume map kind of showing where things are. With that, I'm happy to take any questions regarding the calls and the report for the month of December.
Any questions from the commission or comments? Seeing none. Any public questions or comment on the December report? I'm hearing none. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate the report.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. We will now move on to item 7, which is the general manager report.
Yes, thank you, Board President Spreen. The cover slide of the report.
Stand by. Apologies.
There we go. Thank you. Shows the December 1st strategic planning meeting, community meeting, depicts those particular photos from the strategic plan community meeting. And slide 2, please. This is the LAHCFD countywide fire review slide, and it provides the dates for 2023 activities that include release of the draft report and community workshops and public hearings on the draft report. And if you'll notice the date in October, final report is expected in October of 2023. Moving to the next slide, 3 and 4. These two slides, a resolution and a legislative file report on the Board of Supervisors item that delegated authority from the Board of Supervisors that was sitting as the Board of Directors for the Los Altos Hills County Fire District to the County Council or designee for agreements for legal services, consulting, and testifying experts. And as you recall, the delegation of authority from the Board of Directors, which is the Board of Supervisors, to the Commission is with the exception of litigation. And then moving on to slide 5. During the storm event, some jurisdictions and agencies declared a state of emergency, such as did the town of Los Altos Hills. And slide 5 provides information on who can declare emergency proclamations for the state and for FEMA guidelines. And if you'll notice for the Los Altos Hills County Fire District, if we sustained any losses that needed to be declared, we don't have to declare a state of emergency. We would fold in under the town of Los Altos Hills and submit our forms for damages accordingly. And then slide 6. The fire department hopes to expand its fire fuels crew and work with the district on fire fuels reduction. These discussions are planned for the end of January with a report back to the Commission. Fire fuel crews are provided in the 2023-24 budget. And then moving to slides 7 and 8, this depicts 2 hydrant strikes. Both strikes fortunately had sheriff office reports, so we have vehicle identification numbers on the vehicles that hit the hydrants. La Cuesta, which is the first slide, is repaired. I think it was repaired within almost 48 hours, which was really great from our on-call contractor, and is back in service. And then Altamont repair is under engineering review now. And please note that when I went back to my files and looked at Altamont Black Mountain Road for the January 12th strike, I noticed that we had a December 27th, 2020 strike. And you can see how really large that strike is in letting water out from the hydrant. So I'll be working with engineering to see if there's some way we can put some kind of protective device around the hydrants, although we did that the last time. But one was in the evening and the other's in the day. So those are your 2 hydrant strikes. And then moving to the next attachment or the next slide, news and media releases. These include Captain Gluan's comments to reporter on fire and weather conditions in 2022. And then there's news about the Arasadero evacuation route in that news release. Then there's an attachment on the slide packet. It's just release from CAL FIRE on the new fire hazard severity zone map for state responsibility areas and links to the dates and locations for public hearings on that map. And thank you. That's the end of my report, but I've gone through a lot of information. If you have any questions or comments about the slides, happy to respond.
Thank you, General Manager Logan. Any discussion or comments from the Commission? Yes,
I
Jim.
just have a clarifying questions. I was wondering if the new members, by the way, it's very, very good news that we are going to get some additional resources for the fire department to the benefit of our town. I'm wondering if you have any strong say in what they do, for example, the evacuation route, clearing and stuff like that, or do they just simply work with the fire department on a preset set of tasks?
Yeah, so I'll be working with County Council and with the fire department to work out how we can use those fire fuel crews. And I think we're going to focus on the emergency access roads because those are very important roads. And I see Ryan Cronin shaking his head here. He's very excited about that as the opportunity to work with the fire fuel crews on those emergency access roads, many of which are fire roads. And that will probably be a focus. We want to get the practice in working together with the partnership. So when we get into our bigger projects like I-280, which we're expecting to do in a year or so, we'll have that fire fuels crew ready to go. This is going to take agreements with the fire department and various logistics that we have to work out. So, Ryan, do you want to make any comment on that?
The fire access roads for the fire department, those will be ingress roads for the fire department to use. And so it's specific to their benefit. It's also imperative that they know what those roads are like. When I worked for the department, we would do patrols in the summer, and one of our assignments was to go drive those roads. And it was very enlightening to see their condition. At the time, I had probationary firefighters that I could use to clear those roads. So getting a crew out there to really maintain those access will be really key. So I think that's a great synergy between their needs and our needs, and it will really be the right choice for their utilization.
Great question, Jim. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, General Manager Logan, notice that the strike on Altamont, it appears that on both of those, the cutoff valve didn't work. So do we understand why twice the cutoff valve there didn't work?
Yes, thank you for that. There was an analysis of that the first time, and there'll be analysis the second again. So I don't have that engineering report now, but we are noticing that, yes. Yeah, and it may be because that's under such high pressure. It's a gravity flow system from the tank. It's directly to the tank, kind of what happened when we were at the district parcel, as you recall, when that fire hydrant was struck. So there may be that, but I can't give you a definitive answer now. Jeff Tarantino, who's our district consulting engineer, well, I'm sure that will be part of his report.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
And that's an amazing strike, because I can't imagine a hydrant that's more visible in the middle of the day, you know, with nothing around it for, it's incredible to me, but incredible pictures. So, but these things happen. So
November, December, January are the fire hydrant strike season. If I recall correctly, someone always hits a hydrant, this time of year.
incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public on this report? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will now move on to, make sure I get this right, item 8, report on the development of the successor strategic plan. Strategic planning consultant Scott, could you please introduce this report?
Thank you, President Spreen. Good evening, everyone. And while the slides come up, I'll just make a couple of very brief comments. This may be the last presentation by the ad hoc successor strategic plan committee. Tonight's presentation will talk about the activities in December, and then the ad hoc subcommittee will be working on finalizing the document to bring back next month to the commissioners to review and adopt. And the subcommittee members of Chair Commissioner Mark Warren, Chairperson Joan Sherlock, and Jim Basigi have been driving the creation of the successor strategic plan and conducted an updated SWOT analysis. So all that will be factored into a new document and come before you. So for tonight's review of their activities, I'll turn it over to Chair Commissioner Warren.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Marcy. All right, so next slide, please. Yeah, so we were able to hold an in-person meeting with the, here's the next slide. Yeah, okay, so we held a public meeting. We were able to do it on December 1st at Gardner Bullis School. So thank you for the staff for figuring out a venue for us to actually have an in-person meeting, which was I thought really important for connecting with the public and getting their direct input. And people came out in the middle of a rainstorm for that, which was first of many actually, which was really good. And we were there, and the staff was there. And we had 20 community members come participate. A number of large number of the people who are actively involved. A lot of CERT members, a lot of teen CERT members were there, and we engaged the public. And it was a good chance once again to get them information from the district. And we spent, what do we say? We gave them cookies, we gave them snacks, which is always good. We gave them materials, and then the meeting was so engaging that we went over our time allotment by about 30 minutes. We could have gone for another hour, I think, if we'd let all the public. But we talked about vegetation removal, weed abatement, district work on the evacuation routes, the OK cards and the training opportunities, the district parcel and the budget. It was a really important opportunity, I think, to engage the public and provide background on what the district is, what our role and mission is. And, for example, one of the key questions that usually comes up is educating the public on the fact that the district doesn't have code enforcement capabilities. Usually when you engage the public, there's always a question of, well, why don't you go force my neighbor to go do X, Y, and Z? And it was a chance to educate that, no, we actually don't have, code enforcement. That's the town and that's the county that did that. But it was also a great opportunity to get input from the public. So the next slide, please. So we had my slides aren't matching up with yours, Marcy. Next slide then. Okay, perfect. So we actually engaged the public, had them provide feedback, as you can see on the graphic here, of what their priorities were and what they had heard of. And this was important so that we understood, it's twofold. One, to get their input, but also how effective is our programs in communicating and our community outreach. So it was a good community exercise to get their input and what services they use and are familiar with. As you can see, the district chipping program is probably the most well-known, and it couldn't be a public meeting without someone bringing up the tree program. Yeah. All right, so we gathered that. We also had an opportunity to, as we said, outbound communication with the public. We talked about alert SEC communications. We talked, next slide, keep going. And then the next slide. We talked about Zone Haven and encouraged everyone to sign up and how important Zone Haven is. Next slide. And then to subscribe to our newsletter and get information directly from the district. And then we talked about the strategic plan. And this gave us the opportunity to go through what we've been talking about here quite a bit about the 4 goals of the strategic plan. Well, our theme is long-term resiliency and regional partnerships, but goals: prevention, protection, resiliency, preparedness, infrastructure, and sustainability. And then we drilled down on those further. What's the next slide? Thank you. And so we didn't go through every block on that slide. We didn't make the public sit through all of that, but we did go through the high-level goals and then the specific areas about where we are going to, our programs, and then how we are, our initiatives, and then how we are going to actually achieve examples of how we're going to achieve those. And so it was I think a pretty effective meeting. Next slide. To gather the public input. And I think it was really important personally because it gave a chance for us to, as we work on the strategic plan, to connect directly with the key stakeholders, who are the residents of the district, and get their input and understand what their priorities are. And so as consultant Scott said, that we are going to, take that input, and over the next month, our plan is to fold that into the draft of the actual updated strategic plan and to bring that back in February. All right, Joan, anything to add to that?
No, not in particular. It was just wonderful having the community be so involved, and they were really engaged and gave a great deal of input. And even though the tree program did come up, your answers were excellent, Mark. I think everybody really appreciated the event. I know I got a lot out of it.
Me too. Jim?
I have nothing to add.
Thank you.
Precisely what you said.
Great. So our plan is hopefully to come back in February with a draft, and we can retire the subcommittee.
Wow. Well, thank you to Consultant Scott, Commissioner Warren, and the entire ad hoc subcommittee, which, by the way, is a model for how to have a subcommittee get involved and add energy and make things happen. Because that was a really tough assignment, and it's been handled incredibly. So very thankful for that. Is there any discussion in the commission on that? I think you've answered.
Let me just add also that the effort was supported by Cody Einfalt, the district city staff, and that we had 2 city council members there.
Oh, great. That's great. Any public comment on this item? Looking, nope, none. So in that case, we will now move on to item 9A, the Emergency Services Manager Report. Emergency Services Manager Beebe, please present this report.
Good evening, President Spreen, Vice President Sherlock, and Commission. Sorry, it's weird talking to microphone. This is like kind of tripping me out. Sorry. Thanks for having me tonight. Before I begin my exciting presentation, I would like to just thank you all for the support. It's been a crazy 3 weeks. Jay can attest to that, and some of the staff. Disasters don't care if you're on deadlines or have big projects coming up. So I'd like to happily report that our district staff has stayed on target with our Firewise launch, as well as our resiliency calendar and some other fun things we've been working on. So with that being said, let me start my presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the fun that we've all had lately, a little more in depth, and just kind of give you an overview of what some of the district staff has been working on. So this was called the Atmospheric River Storm. It's called event number 1. That's through the emergency, Office of Emergency Management for the county. And then we had an LAH activation number. So we're working under that, that number. So basically, really any emergency operations objectives are usually to protect life safety, preserve property, and mitigate hazards in Santa Clara County. So that's kind of the objectives that we were working under the last 3 weeks. Obviously, our expected impacts and hazards, rain. I know you guys are shocked at that one. Flooding roadways, landslides, things like that are really things that we look at. We have 3 huge hazards here in Los Altos Hills. Earthquake, flood, and fire are 3 big ones that we like to make sure that we have mitigation on. Also, wind was a huge factor. This is why it became so detrimental to a lot of folks. Falling debris, causing threats to life, also over power lines, knocking down power lines, knocking down power. And for a lot of you here, your Comcast internet also, I think, was affected. Duration. So the emergency operations in the county actually started on December 27th. General Manager Logan was able to go on some of those calls, and then I jumped in starting on January 2nd. Those calls are a collaborative effort. If you see on the right-hand side of my first PowerPoint here, we work under it's kind of like a downhill thing here and then an uphill, right? So we work under the Santa Clara County Office of Emergency Management when it comes to these situational issues that we have. You can see a little bit about what they do. And then it floats down to the town's Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC. That is run through town staff. So the staff I worked with was City Manager Pernajad, Deborah Padovan, Sarah Robustelli, Wu Jay, forgot his last name, Kim, there we go, and several others, Serena. So basically, we together as an EOC where your operations were for the town. And then I'm the disaster service worker, volunteer lead and district liaison to that operational center. And then obviously we help manage and run the CERT. So that's kind of how that flows. So we started out attending, General Manager Logan and I started attending the briefings through the operations area. Sometimes those were up to 4 a day at an hour at a time. Multiple jurisdictions were there, as well as PG&E representatives, National Weather Service, and Valley Water. So we took those learnings there from the briefings, and I went to the town Emergency Operations Center briefings. Those were sometimes 2 or 3 times a day as well. And we wanted to make sure we had the correct messaging and the right communications for our residents. That briefing went from those EOCs down to our district staff. And then, we updated our district staff. I try to do it twice a day. Sometimes it didn't work out that way, but just to make sure. So my report out to the district staff involved what the next 24 hours are going to look like, and then beyond. A safety message. We have some of our staff that lives up in Santa Cruz Mountains, Santa Cruz area that were getting hit pretty hard. I know Marjorie was one of them who has been out of service power for a couple weeks off and on. Also talked about sort of our internal operations. We're sometimes getting calls from residents with some damage that they want to report. So just kind of making sure that we were all sending them to the right places. Again, utilizing a lot of links from the town nixles. I'm sure you guys all got some of those town nixles. And then there were some reporting platforms that you could report damage on. We also wanted to just kind of share the same messaging with residents as we did with staff. I also talked about the town of Los Altos Hills operational updates with staff as well. Really big shout out. They did a really great job. A lot of them are brand new at this. And, you know, we sort of were learning as we go. I will say it was sort of a blessing. This was sort of a slower, prolonged process and not a boom, all of a sudden we're hit with a huge earthquake. I'm not trying to put anything in the world, but it definitely gave us time to sort of get our bearings, you know, really start to learn how each other had worked. And it was very successful. I think the biggest thing you guys have heard was the sinkhole with the culvert being down to asphalt that was only holding it up. So that was sort of our biggest concern, obviously, for ingress and egress of evacuation routes. We also had a tree down at 280 that was cutting off traffic for a little while too. So, you know, those are two big topics that we really want to make sure that we brief down on pretty regularly. I started making some phone calls to staff, checking in, making sure everyone was okay. Then I started calling certs. Didn't get too far with that. So then had some volunteer certs help me out. Everyone seemed to be okay. And then we're kind of blessed because our special events, Andrea Constantine, works overnight in the ambulance, and she was able to really keep an eye on what's going on out there and being able to update our social media when she was off duty. So we had a really good system of and I'll talk about this in a minute, we talk about trusted information sources. It's really important during these kind of times and disasters that we make sure that we're putting out trusted sources messaging. So we've been working really hard with our communications team to really find out where to go for that. And one of the places that we really utilize information from is through the County Office of Emergency Services. They have a Joint Information Center, or a JIC. I'm part of that. I'm not really a PIO, but I'm in the PIO realm. I work really closely with them on some other projects as well. So we're taking that information is going to the town, and then that information goes from district staff into our social media and onto our website. We were also updating our website with important information from the town. So I don't know if anyone's gone on it, but there's a banner at the top that has a click, and that click goes to all the nixles that have been sent out through the town. So we were able to get that pretty quickly up and get the word out for road closures and things like that. So really happy to report that too. So through the JIC, we had calls through the JIC as well. So not only did I have the briefings through operations at the county level, we had town, and we also had the Joint Information Center. Here are some of the links. I'll let you guys read those that we were really kind of focusing on. You know, obviously Caltrans for things that were happening on the freeway, the roads and airports for the county, as well as PG&E and Valley Water, and then our public messaging resources. We actually had a SharePoint that we shared with the JIC as well. I'm not going to go into all this. It's a lot, but I wanted to give you an idea of what I've been doing. General Manager Logan was, able to take my phone calls all hours of the day and night. Some of our meetings were at 9 o'clock at night with our operations area. So I just want to kind of give you an idea where we're at the town too. The town did elect to do a state of emergency, as you probably well know from the nixles. They still continue to be in a state of emergency and will not end that till February 17th. FEMA is coming in 2 days, I believe, to the county and looking at damage assessment and claims and things like that. So more to follow next month when I have some more, but their OA calls are still continuing with the county operations. We do have some sheltering that's taking place right now with quite a few people. So because of the sheltering and the levy breakout in San Benito, they've opted to keep their operations center open. So we'll still be attending those calls, and we were at one today. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Sir Winston Churchill, we all love that one in emergency services. So obviously this lends opportunity to become, prepared. So some of the things that we did, I think Russ is going to talk a little bit about them, or Corey, is we have some FirstNet phones, and I was able to get them up and running with some apps that we needed for the certs. And then we decided probably about a week ago, we found through the town and myself a thing called CalCop, which is a common operating picture, which is something that's really important to, Melvin can probably attest to that, to doing any kind of these responses. So we're going to be, we did a little test, but we have a digital platform that we're going to start doing with damage assessment and sending our certs out with the phone. They have an app that we can see at the Emergency Operations Center, and we can watch live time them updating on damage assessment. So pretty cool, and I'll share a little bit next time. But we were able to start to get that together. And we're going to continue to train and exercise with the town EOC, you know, just because we did this for 3 weeks, you know, we find gaps, we want to work together. Support that common operating picture, you know, continue to strengthen our networks, you know, being in all the classes I've been at and working with some of the county EOC people has been great because a network was there and I could quickly get answers and get things that we needed if we needed it. So continue that good communication. Also, we, you know, it kind of engaged our certs. We had, you know, people coming and helping. We did a really quick cert activation where we went and did some damage assessment. We did it for like an hour because of course, once we activated, it started raining. It was blue skies right before that, but you know, is what it is. But you know, I thought it was really great, and it gave people a little bit of like, hey, I remember how much I kind of like this, and this is good, right? This is good practice. So I'm hoping to kind of keep that momentum going, and then obviously, you know, really continue to support the town and their damage assessment of critical infrastructure and things like that is sort of still on our bandwidth there. And then I think out of it, I think for us and district staff, I think it would be good for us to have an emergency operations plan. So I will continue to start to put that together and build it. And then again, really big thank you to the town staff, CERT team, district staff, commissioners for your support and for getting us all these cool things that we can work with during a disaster. So that is in a report for me.
That is quite a report. Any questions or comments from commission?
I just have a kudo for the town staff that I live off the Pageman Road, and the sinkhole that she's referring to was truly a problem. And it's amazing how quickly they were able to get that sinkhole covered. And it was a matter of less than 24 hours. So, you know, from being a 1-lane road became 2-lane road, which it normally is. We are back to being 1-lane road again for a different problem. But that particular problem just was amazingly quickly solved. Thank you, Councilman George Tyson. Well, whatever.
I love echoing Jim. I think that this was a real test of what the staff can do. And I think you really did us proud, Jay, in pulling that all together and staying on top of everything religiously every minute. So this isn't something that, you know, we've had to deal with really as a group before. And I think that it was remarkable what you pulled off. So I want to say thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If there's anything that comes across your mind that you would have liked to have seen the staff do, or how we can be prepared, we're really open to finding better ways to improve. And we really believe, don't let a good crisis go to waste. So we use this as an opportunity to try all of our skills. And I think communication, Emergency Services Manager, BB, if I could really characterize anything that seemed to be the most important glue that held everything together, was the communication over and over and over, making sure that from OEM all the way through to the jurisdictions that we were hearing the same messaging. And then as we listened, our valley floor was really spared a lot. And we heard the kind of devastation and evacuations and flooding and reservoirs over, you know, spilling going on in the south part of the county, San Benito. I was out of town and had to drive back, cut my trip short by a day because I knew I was not going to get through Hecker Pass, because I had gone through a couple of days before and said, this water is ready to overspill on the road. So we really were very fortunate by what occurred with this extensive rain event. But communication to me was the key.
You know, I'm really glad that the commissioners got to hear the detail of what was going on during those 3-week period, because most of our residents are not going to realize how much energy and overtime hours were spent assuring that we have full readiness as emergencies sort of manifested out of this 3-week process. And all kinds of things were, I think, such as worrying about access roads being blocked for whatever reasons. The fact that someone was thinking about that and we were on top of that is made our residents safer. And most of them won't realize that, but I certainly do. And I'm so glad you got to explain that to the whole commission, because I'm very appreciative. And that's what this organization should be doing. And any resident who hears about this should feel good that they've got an organization focused on that. And thank you for the work during this really unique, unprecedented 3-week period. Please.
I think, you know, whenever a disaster happens, it's always afterwards that everybody's criticized, you know, and it's like no one ever does enough. And I think that getting ahead of it, like you all did, even if it turned out to be maybe a little bit of overkill, that was absolutely the right thing to do, because you were on top of it regardless every second. So you could never be, you know, faulted in any way, or the town to be faulted in any way for not being ahead of what was going on. And I thought that was very smart. Grateful for that.
Well, thank you very much for that report. I really appreciate it. Any public comments on this report, by the way?
Yes, we have a comment from Alan Epstein.
Great, thank you. Alan, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for everything you did during the emergency. I would just like to hear how many certs were involved and specifically what they did. I'm just unfamiliar with it, and as the president pointed out, I think citizens should be aware of what took place. So if you could take just a couple minutes and say how many certs were involved and what type of activities they were involved with, I'd really appreciate hearing. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thanks, Alan, for asking that. It's always good to talk about our CERT program, because I think they don't get enough credit for what they do. So yes, we on January 10th, actually on January 9th, we gave the certs a notice that we may be utilizing them for damage assessment. And what that means is the town Public Works Department was working so many hours and we're exhausted. There's only, I think, 5 of them total. They were working 24/7. And we wanted to help capture some maybe little things that were not being seen or reported by residents. So on the 10th, we decided to activate CERT to just go do a quick drive around. We actually have a mapped routes that we take. So I think a total of 15 certs responded. We were on kind of a time crunch. There was weather coming in, and so we only took about an hour and a half, but 3 teams of certs went out, 1 driver, 1 scribe, someone to write down what's going on, and 1 ham operator. So during that time, it was really important to have, and I think General Manager Logan alluded to it, communication is everything. It's something you learn in EMS. If you don't have communication, you don't have anything. So, you know, obviously sending certs out into areas that don't have Wi-Fi and things like that was a little scary. So we got hams involved. So they went on some what we call critical infrastructure checks. That is some critical areas within the town, as well as looking at other little things that maybe people aren't reporting or didn't realize were out there. That's how we utilize them. We plan to do that again, potentially. I'd like to do it in a couple weeks. Just to kind of get our feet wet again with this new damage assessment platform. And Alan, we always are looking for people to come join CERT. So you just give me a jingle and I'll talk to you more about it, but I hope that that helps.
Yeah, I wanted to comment too, that we really had to be careful, because when you're in that kind of event that's going on, you just don't want to send certs or residents out and put them in harm's way. And so we really, Victoria and I talked at length about waiting for that little blue sky opportunity, making it very short, very goal focused, and getting the experience, but not having to then have the something happen and then counter back and say, why did we do that? So everything is balanced, and everything is, this has to be talked through as to, is this a good place and is this a good goal to convene the certs to? So that was kind of my take on it. I felt that weight when we were thinking of launching out the certs, that this is just not a drill or an exercise. This is really putting people in hazardous way, because there are trees that are precarious, there's roads that are flooding, and yet we needed that relief for the town to help them. And we thought that was a very good endeavor. Thank you.
Yeah, and the impact was so broad across town with creeks overflowing and branches and big trees down. And we had several things on our road as well. So I imagine there was to be able to scope out the town and see what is the situation. It really is, it's what CERT's for. And it's a great use of it. So I was really pleased to see them actually activated and working. And it's brave of our residents to be doing that. So I really appreciate they were involved. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for the question, Alan. Okay. Let's see, any other public
Yeah,
comments?
can I provide just an informational, real
Sure.
quick? So the Defensible Space Brush Chipping Program, it was supposed to start today, the 17th. And I've been in contact with Fire Safe Council who oversee the program. I think for the safety of the crew, because there are still muddy conditions, soft shoulders, standing water in certain places, they're pushing the beginning date to next Monday. This also is a benefit to the residents that you can still join onto, or any of the commissioners or anyone listening, they could still, that lives in the Los Altos, can still sign up our website, LAHCFD.org, and community programs. You'll be put on the wait list, but we will move you as long as you sign up before next Monday. And I have had quite a few phone calls from residents who had fallen trees. They were able to get the gardener out. Gardener is able to, chop down the branches of the wood, and we were able to add them to that January chipping list. So it's just kind of an FYI.
That's actually great to know, because that's actually my plan. I got a yard full of stuff I got to drag over. In my
Get to
little
it,
pile.
and get to it before
Thank you.
before next Monday. We'll add you.
Great. Any other comments on this? Okay, well, moving on to 9B, which is the Integrated Hazardous Fuel Report, I believe. Technical Analyst, Project Manager Cronin, could you please present this report?
President Spreen, absolutely. Vice President Sherlock, Commissioners, nice to see you in person again, or some of you again, but the rest of you. All right, our IHFR project, the Arrastradero evacuation route hardening, it has been completed. You've heard the updates along the way. I'm proud to say that we completed it in its entirety. That was an effort to bring together all of the participating agencies and get all the permits. We had a great success working with Brush Hog Tree Care. They're a new vendor for us. They're a local vendor just over the hill in Half Moon Bay. Small business, happens to be a woman-owned business as well. They perform very well, and they're very interested in joining our pool of contractors for the chipping program as well. So that was very successful. We had, as you can see, a number of participating agencies, and this number is only going to grow as we go forward into the next project. So this was each project seems to get bigger, and our working with those agencies and establishing those relationships has been very, very key. You'll look at the before and after pictures, and hopefully you'll see it just looks nice. It looks cleaner, better visibility. My wife commented it just looks safer, if she was going to walk along those trails. So that it went very well. Can we have the next slide, please? I have to give a shout out to retired Captain Denise Gluen. As you're aware of her credentials, she is a master gardener, and she had a great conversation with the Stanford University's Director of Conservation Planning, Dr. Alan Lahner, I believe is how you pronounce his name. They had some very big concerns with that beautiful red toad, or frog, actually, it's not toad, and other animals that live in that area. It's a protected area within the riparian area. The furry-footed wood rat, didn't get to see one, saw plenty of rats, but not the furry-footed one. But with that conversation that Captain Gluen was able to have with him, he really came to be at ease that we understood his perspective and his concerns, and they spoke the same language. And in the end, we realized we're working on the same program. And he deputized her as a member of that team. And I think it was just great to see that relationship blossom, and we're going to be working with them more in the future. You know, we're not out there just denuding the landscape, and it looks better. It's better for the environment, and it really is in concert with what they wanted to do. So that was just such a pleasant relationship and meeting of the minds. And it really was the captain's hard work that did that. Let's see. Okay. The initial and primary objectives were to remove all the organic fuels. We did have we've discovered and removed a significant amount of trash. And we'll have more on that coming up in future projects. Great opportunities for citizen outreach. You know, we got our right of entry permits, and some of that required knocking on doors and meeting people. And it really gave us an opportunity to put the face of the fire district in front of people and talk about our programs and really be that personal connection. And I had a lot of fun with it. It was, you know, it's like the old days of showing up on a fire engine. We were fortunate. We were one of the first ones to get out there ahead of the wind. So we did take down a couple of dead trees, a lot of dead limbs, and hopefully we reduced the wind profile of those trees and really saw a benefit when those storms timely hit right after we were done. Coming up at our next meeting, we'll have the full report, and I'll tell you all about the yards and measures and, you know, really how it all panned out. And then further along in May, hopefully it won't be strewn with, you know, new leaves too much, but we'd like to have a family bicycle project tour. So we're going to invite anybody who wants to ride a bike to meet at our parcel, and we're going to ride the length of Arrastradero between Old Adobe and the Park and Ride, meet staff, talk about our programs, maybe have some coffee and donuts and things. And with that, that's the end of this report, and I may be talking again soon. Any questions?
Please, George.
Really nice documentation. At one point, one document I saw it was 2 miles, and the other one it said 4. Is it possible that was 2 ways on 2 miles?
We did both sides of the street.
Yeah.
So it may even be as high as 6. That'll be in the final documentation. I got to kind of map it out again. I have mapped it out, but it escapes me. I could probably look it up if you, and I see Denise is here, so I wasn't sure she was able to check.
Yeah,
can I get back to you with the actual distance?
I think Denise has a comment.
I was just going to say, George, or Commissioner Tyson, typically what we do is measure each side of treatment because it is traffic controlled and it is working as if that's mileage, because we're not doing both sides at the same time. So each side is considered separate mileage. And Ryan can get the exact total for the final report. Thank you.
Thanks. Sounds like a great project.
Mark, you had a comment? Here you go. Here.
All right. Yeah, project looks really good. Quick question. Around on a lot of the trees that we limbed up, I noticed that we left logs, rounds that were too big to clearly go into the chipper. Is our plan to leave those there, or are we going to go back and collect those?
They are organic, so they can reside there. There is some wildlife that will take advantage of it. But there is discussion of whether we should, what we want to pick up. So I don't have a final answer on that.
Okay.
A lot of that is very good oak, and so it has value, and it would make sense for us to possibly retrieve that. So.
Okay, just curious.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Okay, Jim, then Joe.
Yeah, my wife and I basically take that road twice a day or something thereabouts. And I can't tell you how pleased we are with the outcome of this project. It's airy, you don't feel like you're hemmed in, and you feel safe. And we have actually broadcasted that to the friends of ours that actually take that road as well. So have you noticed how different this road is and how much safer it feels because of all the branches have been cut out, and you can see the blue sky through some of the branches. And I'm really to my heart's content, those old eucalyptus trees next to the park and ride area have been trimmed out and cut. And I think some of the blocks that you're referring to are those blocks. I'm hoping those get picked up. Everything else can remain, but those eucalyptus big blocks that are remaining on the side of the road can get picked up.
Okay, we will have discussion and I'll get an answer for you.
And also I want to basically finish by saying that I'm looking forward to seeing the same thing happen to the 280 stretch that's all along that area.
Well, that's a positive testament there. So thank you very much for that. Joan?
Yeah, it's a great program. Also, I just wanted to put out a challenge. I think the bicycle tour is an excellent idea, and I hope that all the commissioners are going to show up. Hey, look at the nodding heads. Yeah, maybe. Great.
Thank you very much. Let's see. I think there's and now the 9C is the CWPP and Annex 4 report, I believe. General Manager Logan, are you presenting that report? I see. Okay, great.
All right, I was briefed on this today, so hopefully I can do justice to it. The CWPP program is moving forward. The commission, the County Board of Supervisors rather, each had a meeting within their districts during the end of 2022. So there were 5 meetings. Those are all done. They are recorded and they can be seen through the FireSafe. There is an advisory team is going to have their second meeting, and that's scheduled for the 24th of January. And representatives from the district will be attending that. By the way, the current draft of the CWPP is from 2016. So this is in time, it definitely needs an update here. The management team is going to finalize the draft for the annex. We're in Annex 4, and County Fire is leading that. They too have a plan to have a meeting before the end of the month, but no particular date was provided for that. And likewise, DUDEC consultants will be by the end of the month. So January is going to be a busy day to move forward that annex, and that is where Los Altos Hills fits within the CWPP. Okay, on the next slide, here is the timeline. Basically, it's been shifted by 6 months. Originally, it was to be completed by May, and now you can see here the plan is to have this completed by August. This is a huge endeavor, and with all that's gone into it, this is I feel it's a pretty reasonable shift because it does take time to bring all this together. And basically, this is all about forest health, shaded fuel breaks, escape routes, public education, all the things that the district is heavily involved in. So our participation in that annex is critical. Things are moving forward.
Great.
End of report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Let's see. Any commissioner comment or question about that process? Seeing none. Any public comment on that report?
We have Denise has a comment.
Denise?
Just, I was at the Fire Safe Council meeting, board meeting today, and just they'll be announcing tomorrow to understand the overall, they're going to be managing the CWPP. It's kind of County Fire's been holding a little bit of the control, and it was until that was awarded, and that was awarded, they announced to Fire Safe Council. So they'll be kind of pulling all of the stakeholders to get their annexes, help them develop those, and just additional information. So that will be the source where you kind of be directed to for questions regarding CWPP outside of what we're doing in Annex 4. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have a comment from Alan Epstein.
Okay, Alan, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. It's more of a question. I'm just still a little bit confused as to the responsibility for preparing the CWPP. We have Fire Safe Council doing some work. We've hired Dudek to do some work. Could someone explain how those two things come together and when the public has an opportunity to review the work that's going to be completed? Thanks so much.
Thank you for the question. Who would like to, can we give an answer to that?
I think that would be a question I would like to talk with staff about and then report back at the next meeting on.
Okay.
Because it is complicated, as is pointed out, that the county is doing the CWPP, that's countywide. Each agency or jurisdiction has an annex, and a template is being built for how the annexes are then going to be reported to the county CWPP. And then I don't know about the meetings that are going to be held, because we had the meetings to start, and now where they're going to be next, I'm not sure. So I do want to consult with Eugenia and get a little more information. She sits on one of the advisory committees for the CWPP in the county. And
Okay.
she's not able to join us today because she has the atmospheric river now that's hitting her home area. So she doesn't have Wi-Fi at this point in time. So
Clearly, this is a complicated process, so it's a good question. We'll get some more information on how that's going to come
Right.
together.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. We will now move on to the next item, which is item 10. Is that correct?
10. Yeah, item 10.
Okay. Report on the draft HIZ rebate program and to provide direction to staff.
yes, thank you, President Spring. Before you tonight, commissioners, is a draft of the HIZ rebate advisory. And this is just a start of the conversation that I think we need to have, and just wanted to get your feedback on this advisory. At the November 2022 commission meeting, the second amendment of the 2023 Fire Safe Council Agreement was approved, with a scope of services for Fire Safe Council to manage the HIZ rebate program. The HIZ advisory states the program goals. And let me just read them to you very quickly. Residents will learn how to identify hazardous fire fuels, what resources are available for removal of fire fuels to harden their property, how to create and maintain defensible zones around structures, and for how to establish hazardous fire fuel mitigation as neighborhood efforts through Firewise USA. So those are the goals of the HIZ program and then the rebate program. The key components of the HIZ rebate program is the rebate is to incentivize residents to complete the HIZ recommendations and qualifications for a rebate. The amount of the rebate proposed is 50% match up to $3,000, but it's really up to the commission to opine if a different amount is suggested. That is amount that we talked about through staff and thought was a reasonable amount. Work is to be completed by a licensed contractor within 60 days of the resident receiving the HIZ assessment. HIZ not completed by a licensed contractor or timely will not qualify for the rebate. Availability of licensed contractors will be assessed as we get into the pilot program. And HIZs are on a first come, first serve and limited availability until the pilot program wraps up and staff and administrative capacity is determined. The HIZ advisory is a pilot document. Reports will be provided at future commission meetings, and the advisory will be adjusted accordingly. HIZ assessment tool is on an IT platform, and February 1st is the date the tool is to be configured and available. April 1st is the date that we hope to start the HIZ rebate pilot program. And Fire Safe Council and the district team are in planning phase 1 at this time. So that's a really brief overview and summary of this document that you have in the packet. And I have to remark that this document was framed up back in 2019 when the first report went to the commission for a HIZ rebate program, was completely sidetracked when COVID came along in 2020, and we couldn't even get onto people's property for over a year and a half to do an HIZ. So I feel like we're kind of in that catch-up mode now with HIZ and the rebate program to incentivize residents. Because when we send the assessor out, We don't want just the resident to say, oh, well, this is great. And then it just goes on their desktop and it doesn't get done. The rebate program is to incentivize action. So they take action for fire fuel protection for their property. So that's my report. Happy to answer any questions or hear either comments as to how you'd like to see this program run.
Thank you, report. I'd really like to hear some comments from commissioners because this is a very different kind of thing we're moving into, and it really is a strong advocacy. I want to see what people think of the approach and the both the strength of it and are the protections built into it seem reasonable. I see Jim ready to talk.
I have a question / comment. How about for those homeowners or that basically want to do the work themselves?
Yes.
As maybe some alternative other than just simply contractor receipt, perhaps maybe the before and after pictures combined with the inspection or something like that to qualify some, at least the material part of it.
Yeah, so the staff did toss that around, but let me kind of give you some of the pros and cons of that. We want to incentivize residents, and if they can do the work themselves, that would be fine. However, we don't want to employ residents to do the work because that then puts a connection between their work and the benefit to the district. We get into a whole employment issue. We don't really want to incentivize paying residents to do what they should be doing anyway. And so those are some of the factors that lean against having other than a licensed contractor, because we've got to show public benefit. We have to show that that it is, truly a fire science kind of issue with defensible space, licensed contractors. It can be tracked, it can be explained, it can be a good use of public funds. And so that's where we're saying it's not for everybody, this rebate program. They're going to be limited. And also the benefit to every resident is having the HIZ assessment. That is a tremendous value in itself. And so that's the quid pro quo. We'll give you the HIZ assessment, send a person out to individually meet with you, use these tools, and then it's up to the resident. Do they want to do it themselves? No rebate involved. Do they want to hire a licensed contractor? Depends upon how much vegetation they're going to have to remove. And then that becomes part of the rebate program. So that's a quick overview. Sure.
Oh. I have trouble seeing what are the limits of this program. You refer to it as a pilot, and I see it's limited to a certain number per
Yes.
month. Is that stipulated in here? I didn't see it.
No, it's not, because we don't know. It's really capacity limited. To be a certified HIZ assessor, there is a lot of education that goes with it. And when we met with Fire Safe Council today, that was one of our questions is how many can you produce? How many can you do? And then we have some staff here that we're going to train. That's fine. We can train them, get them licensed or get them certified. I shouldn't say licensed, but then that takes them off the projects that they're doing here, like evacuation routes and all the various activities we have going. So it's not dollars. It is capacity. It's capacity to have this kind of a program. And then the administration, how does Fire Safe Council handle all of the checks and balances, the auditing that's going to go on to get a rebate check out? So, and that's the pilot part of the program. We're going to start out small, and we don't want to overset expectations and have the residents disappointed.
Thank you. You know, this resonates with me because I'm on the board of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and we often are thinking up how do we get people to decarbonize and what incentive programs do we have? And one of the things we try to build in there is, aside from the budget, how do we build in enough flexibility? Because if we're doing 2 or 3 different things, can we move money from one to the thing that's working, that resonates with people? And so I applaud the flexibility, even though it's kind of vague from a controls perspective here, and would say, first off, I like the percent and the dollar limit. This reminds me of something I think we saw Saratoga doing before the pandemic. And so this is not so new now to see that. So, so I applaud that, both of those, and then also the flexibility, and just as long as you report back to us and we see how it's going, we can provide further feedback and support as time goes by.
Yeah, and we're all for flexibility, but I will tell you that chipping program, it took us 1.5 years to get a chipping program worked out to where we have the right metrics, we can measure it, we've got the right tools, we have the right administration, we can specify every dollar and cents that goes into it. That was a long process. So this is more complicated. And so jumping into this without some limitations, I'm just really hesitant to do, but I want that flexibility and I want you all come and we'll take care of it. But we've got to have that built in to the staffing component and capacity and not overextend what the resident expects, because we don't want to give a program and then somebody's disappointed with it. That's the worst. So
To follow up on George's question, it sounds like we're going to, assuming we like the general amounts and so forth, we'll need to get some feedback at what is the capacity that we would have, and then we would have to then approve a number of $3,000 rebates, because this is a first come first serve, limited time only. Come and get it, and really just incentivize people to come get them before they run out, kind of thing. Is that sort of the process we're going to have to follow? Is figure out the capacity, decide on a number of available rebates, and then push it forward?
yeah, and there's another complexity too, because we may want to start targeting areas. So I'd like to see HIZs, at least a conversation around the targeting. So what are we going to target? We've got FireWise communities. Wouldn't it be great to go back to those FireWise communities and have some target areas of high need properties for the HIZ? Or the community strategic fuel break, have some of those areas targeted, or target around the evacuation routes when we're out there doing the HIZs there. So there's a number of different ways that we can sort and match and look at where the HIZs are going to be focused.
Joan?
Sorry, Mark doesn't have a button. Do you want to go? Yeah, I think, first of all, if we can make it an additional perk to our FireWise activities, they will then think, when they're getting all this, maybe when we're putting the new flyer out and stuff, we could add that to it as being the initial focus, something like that. And then did Saratoga do a pilot of this first to get the kinks out? How did they do it? Do you know?
I don't know. I just remember reading about their program, but I
Right.
don't know the operationally.
I think as long as we voice that it's a pilot, everywhere we're talking, then we have a little more give and take in what we do and how much we take, et cetera, that it's really a test and see how it goes in the first 3 to 6 months. And then, but I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
I mean, it can only be a win-win. So.
Other comments? Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
Take that, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I'd like to hear from County Council. I want to make sure that as we do this, that you've done the proper review, that this is an appropriate use of public funds, and that we don't run afoul of, the rules and regulations and, the law that we operate under.
Yes, Commissioner. Jay and I have had several meetings about this program. We're continuing to think carefully about how we specify the requirements imposed on residents that take advantage of the program, and the respective responsibilities of Fire Safe Council and the district. I'm reluctant to speak about any confidential legal advice that I've given to General Manager Logan in this public meeting, but she and I are carefully examining that issue.
Oh, George, go ahead.
I would just like to build on what Commissioner Sherlock said, and perhaps for phase 2, if we said the $3,000 limit, but $5,000 if you're a FireWise community, we'll just up the ante a little.
I don't know what the typical cost is of really, if it's a property that has never had this done, any assessment done. I don't know if there's any kind of median that we looked at. Any idea? I mean, does it go up to 20K? How much can it be?
My last dead Monterey pine cost $3,700.
It's the beginning. Thanks.
Yeah, basically a day's worth of a tree crew can easily cost $10,000. If you have a lot of stuff to do. Now, I don't know if shrubbery ends into that cost, but 3,000 is easy to spend pretty fast. And I think Mark's question is a good one, but I'd like to think that I see this different from the complaints about the tree program, in that this is very much sticking to a scientific method, certified people who are, because one of the complaints there was, is this really making an effect? And this is really starting from the top of, this is an effect about making the house safer, and it's done by certified people who are judging that before they even enter into doing the work. So I'm optimistic that we won't run afoul of that, and this will have the proper benefit without any of the catches like that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, wait, do we need any more direction for you? I've heard no complaints about the amount or the parameters as defined. We've heard one comment about maybe even an additional incentive if there's a Firewise, if it's forming an entire Firewise community. And I think that most of the questions have been about, getting details of capacity that we can expect to try and do so that we can look at a full budget on it and hopefully approve something.
Right. And this is very helpful because Fire Safe Council, we've met with them, their whole team, and they'll have the benefit of listening to this discussion that you've had, and then knowing where we need to come back and how carefully we need to design the pilot program and report back to you. And I think the tool is going to be very important because the tool is called a DSpace tool, defensible space tool. It's on an iPad and it's programmed. And so when the assessor goes out with the resident, they work from this iPad. All the documents are loaded in, the photos are loaded in, all of the timelines are loaded in. And so that makes for tremendous accountability, which I think is really helpful. So we'll have a lot of discussion coming forward, but this is a great opportunity to hear from the commission and then explore these questions with Fire Safe Council.
Okay.
Because they are doing HICs in other jurisdictions. So we'll benefit from that.
Great, thank you. Okay. Any public comments on this?
Yes, we have a comment from Alan Epstein.
Okay, Alan, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. I very much like to applaud the initiative that's being taken by the district in this area. I think this is a program that will be very well welcomed by the community. Doesn't make up for the old dead tree removal program, but it certainly helps to assist people who have problems with on their properties. I'd like to suggest that you be as liberal as possible to get the program going. I see some things that seem constricting, like 60 days. What difference does it make if it's 60 days or 90 or 120 days if they get the work done? Licensed contractor, I'm assuming that just means someone who has a contractor's license, not someone that has a specific license with regards to hazardous fuels removal. This is actually quite similar to the program that the town proposed for its FEMA hazard reduction program that I worked on with Cody for many months. We're hopeful of getting approval of that program. It has passed the state of California's acceptance. So I compliment you on the program. I suggest that you be as liberal as possible and get out there and try it. And thanks so much for the initiative.
Great, thank you very much for the comments. Okay, we'll now move on to any other public comments? Thank you. Move on to item 11, which is approving the Second Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement for Environmental Consulting Services with Dudek Environmental Consulting Services. General Manager Logan, do you want to present a report on this?
Yes, thank you, President Spring. This is the Second Amendment for Dudek, and what it does is, as you recall, back when the Dudek agreement was put together, there were 6 projects that it embodied. And those 6 projects were approved by the commission. 2 of the projects have been completed, and that was on the I-280 projects that had to be done to get the FEMA application in. And now we're into project 5 and 6. And the memorandum in the report from Eugenia Rendler really spells out what those projects are. So project 5 is a $12,000 600 not to exceed amount. And project 6 is $8,400 not to exceed, for a total of $21,000. And then extending the term of the agreement to June 30th of 2024. That's the recommendation on the agenda item. And project 5 is the opportunity to include initial assessment and field verification of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District Community Strategic Fuel Break and provide subject matter expertise on future project planning and consulting as described in Exhibit C of the agreement. And so what we're trying to do is bring DUDEC in now to the south part of the district and start looking at CEQA compliance and initial assessments so we can do more in that area. And we need that consulting time, and that's what these two projects would do. So with that is pretty much what I understand from the discussions and from the memo put forth. I would recommend approval of the second amendment to the DUDEC professional services agreement for that not to exceed amount and to extend the agreement deadline to June 30th of 2024.
Great, thank you. Any clarifying questions from Commission? I know there's a lot of detail in the packet itself, which should explain a lot of this. Seeing none, I'll now entertain a motion.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I passed.
No.
Does this include the Mora Drive by any chance?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll still entertain a motion at this point.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the second amendment as in under item number 11.
And
I will second that.
thank you.
Sherlock seconds, sorry.
Items open for discussion. Any more discussion from the Commission on this? Seeing none, any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have a comment from Alan Epstein.
Alan, you may comment.
Yes, thank you very much.
Hang on, Alan.
We're having technical difficulties. Hold on one second, Alan, please.
Is it okay to go now?
Can sort of hear you. Try speaking up and speaking loudly.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that did it.
I apologize. Thank you so much. My question relates to the strategic fuel break. My understanding of the strategic fuel break is it's actually pretty much all on Mid-Penn Peninsula land. And Mid-Penn, if they have one expertise at all, it's the expertise to study everything quite carefully with regards to environmental impact. We haven't heard an update on what the status is of the strategic fuel break. So I'm curious as to why the district is going to have responsibility for this work since Mid-Penn owns the land and has the expertise or the consulting expertise to understand what the impact is going to be. So I would just appreciate understanding better the role that DUDEC is going to play in this strategic fuel break. Thank you so much.
Sure, I can just make a quick comment on that. So the strategic fuel break is that boundary between Mid-Penn and the district. So we're looking at district property only. We're not looking at Mid-Penn's property.
Right.
But we're saying if Mid-Penn's going to do their side of the strategic fuel break, as a partner, we want to do our side. And so this is looking at the properties, and some of them involve the fire roads and the emergency access roads. Where can we pick and choose from those areas along that strategic fuel break on the district's
Right.
and it's not district property, it's just the residents in the district that can benefit from that kind of analysis. But it's mainly going to be CEQA and assessments as to what programs the district can do then in evacuation routes down there and in the emergency roads.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Okay. No other public comments? Great. In that case, no further discussion. We will now vote. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct a roll call.
President Spreen.
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock.
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji.
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson.
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
And the motion passes 6-0 with one absent.
Great, thank you. We'll now move on to item 12, financial and district clerk reports. Item 12A is receipt of the fiscal year 2023-2024 revised draft budget for discussion and to provide direction to staff. Budget Manager Morreale, could you please present the report?
Thank you. Good evening, President Spreen and members of the Commission. It's a pleasure again to present the draft budget for fiscal year 23-24. At the Commission meeting on November 17, 2022, the preliminary district draft budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024 was first presented. And that meeting was followed by the first public meeting of the Standing Budget Committee held on November 3rd, 2023. And Corey, do we have the slides available to be seen?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Okay. And we can go to slide 2 beyond this point. Thank you. And just slide 2, Corey. Thank you. Tonight's meeting will be brief as it really represents the third public meeting on the matter of the budget. Our purpose this evening is to present the draft budget as revised with the latest county information and to seek the Commission's authorization to submit it to the County Office of Budget Analysis by February 3rd, 2023 as required. We are also seeking Commission's authorization to incorporate any changes that may come back from the county after this evening's presentation of the budget. Staff will return back to the Commission at the upcoming February 21st meeting on the results of the county review. We're not sure if we'll receive changes, but they could in fact come back in. And slide 3. This slide presents the dates that are anticipated for the budget action items that's upcoming in 2023. Essentially, as I mentioned, we will submit the county budget as revised this evening to the county on February 3rd. We'll come back to the commission, the district commission, on February 21st and report if there are any changes. And beyond that, we move on to the budget workshops held at the county level, and they are anticipated in the month of May. Right now, our dates are 15th and 17th. We'll see if those hold. And it will be the Board of Supervisors will have budget hearings in June, typically several days in June. And ultimately, the county will approve and adopt the budget, and we will come back to the commission for final approval and adoption as well in June of 2023. Next slide. The revised budget that you have in front of you this evening includes 3 notable updates, which are all financially positive overall. Firstly, property tax revenue has now been updated for the county's most recent estimates, which we received, I think, last week. And they have come in at $771,360, or 5.45% above the prior estimate, for a total property tax revenue base of approximately $14.9 million. The latest projections confirm a robust fiscal year 22-23 property tax increase of 5.84%, so nearly 6%, followed by a fiscal 23-24 projection of 2.6%. So this equates to nearly an 8% increase over 2 years. Secondly, we've modified the budget for interest income for fiscal year 23-24, and we increased it by about $80,000 or 31%. We looked at our current trends on interest income that came in the fourth quarter of 2022. And we're also cognizant of the federal rate increases that took place in the fourth quarter of 2022. In total, there were 7 federal rate increases in 2022. Lastly, we just made some operational line item adjustments for a total expenditure reduction of about $28,000. So as revised, the draft budget now proposes a use of available fund balances of $4.1 million in contrast to the $4.9 million previously presented. Overall, a very positive change of $880,000 for $880,400. On the next slide. Thank you, Corey. The revised draft budget before you remains consistent with the expenditure allocations that we reported in the November meeting, including additional catch-up resource funding requests. The draft budget applies 78% of all expenditures towards essential fire, life, and safety services. That's 58% for contract fire and emergency medical services, 18% for life and safety community projects, and 2% for district-owned capital equipment purchases. So the overall theme, if you will, of the budget has remained the same since our November presentation. And next slide, please. You may recall this presentation, which shows revenues, expenditures, and the projected fund balances of the district through June 30th, 2024, which does include $14 million in commitments, which were continued from the prior year adopted budget for operational continuity, emergencies, infrastructure, wildfire technology, and building and improvements. The ending fund balance now, as revised, it comes out to $33,705,513, and it's $1.6 million over what was presented in November. And that's led mostly or almost wholly by the increases in the county provided property tax projections on a cumulative basis for both 22-23 and 23-24. Again, nearly an 8.5% increase in revenue over the 2 years. And next slide, please. So with that, we are available. That ends our report. Essentially, again, to summarize, we have essentially the same budget that presented in November, but with the positive property tax results added in, and which results in less of a use in available fund balances to the amount of about $4.1 million. And with that, we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions and comments from commission? Nope, not seeing any. Okay, any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have a comment from Alan Epstein.
Expected that, okay. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. I've made comments on the proposed budget at a number of opportunities. Basically, there hasn't been any change in the budgets that's been prepared, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I'll just reiterate a couple points. Salaries are increasing by a factor of 3 from what they are in FY 22-23 to over $2.2 million. Relative to the projects that are going to be completed, the expenditure of projects, that number seems to be quite excessive. There are $2.6 million in equipment for which there's been no appreciable discussion as to what the equipment is, why it is necessary, and why it isn't part of the existing contract with the fire department, who is responsible for providing equipment to the district. Contract services increased by 5 times. There's a contingency of over $1 million. The district has had quite high contingencies in every one of its past 4 years budgets and has never spent any material amount of the contingency. So the contingencies seem to be excessive. The interest rate earnings is a considerable amount less than what is likely to occur. With $34 million in assets, in cash, the earnings are certainly going to be more than 1% of the 34 million. It's much more likely to be somewhere between 2 and 4%, or closer to $1 million than it is to 34 million. Lastly, with regards to the commitments, I've spoken on a number of occasions about the commitments. I see there's been no change in the commitments. I don't understand the rationale that the district is using with regards to commitments. It has $1 million for wildfire protection. It's had it for the last 4 years, but hasn't spent a single dollar on wildfire protection. There's no shortage of money, so if the district was interested in spending for wildfire protection, it could do it. Lastly, I don't feel the budget provides the operational detail, which is typical of what a budget should provide with regards to the goals, assumptions, and timelines that drive the fundamental calculations to come up with the amount of the budget. In summary, I just feel that the numbers are quite excessive relative to the output that's going to be produced. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comments. Perfect timing. Okay, let's see. We want to move on to item 12B, As discussed under the previous agenda item, item 12B is an authorization for staff to incorporate any revisions made after January 17th of this year by the County of Santa Clara Office of Budget and Analysis, OBA, to the revenues and expenditures into the revised draft budget. Are there any clarifying questions from the commission about that? Okay, I think none. I will entertain a motion. And will you please state your name as well? Motion in a second. Don't jump too fast. Melvin, we'll get you on the board today, so.
Second.
Need it first. Melvin's first.
Sherlock seconds.
All right, thank you. Okay, the item is now open for discussion. Is there any discussion from the commission on this? Again, this is the authorization for staff to incorporate the revisions coming from OBA. Seeing none, is there any public comment on this specific item? Seeing none, great, thank you. Let's see, in that case, District Clerk Vargas, Clerk Vargas, please conduct the roll call.
All right, President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock,
Yes.
Commissioner Basigi,
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
All right, and the motion passes 6-0 with one absent.
Thank you. Now, item 12C, as also discussed under agenda item 12A, 12C is authorization for staff to submit the fiscal year 2023-24 revised draft budget to the OBA by February 3rd, 2023, which will be before our next meeting. Any clarifying questions on that from the?
No.
Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Warren moves.
Warren moves.
Tyson seconds.
Dyson seconds. Thank you. Item is open for discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, thank you. We will now vote. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct the roll call.
President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock,
Yes.
Commissioner Basigi,
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 6-0 with one absent.
Great, thank you. Now moving on to item 12D, a change of topic here. Receive report on the purchase of district laptops for staff personnel from CDW. And let's see, I believe District Clerk Vargas, you're going to present a report on this?
Yes, and this is just more of an informational item. So over the course of the past few weeks, the district has taken proactive measures to ensure that staff is equipped with the technology tools to conduct district business in a best practices mode and be ready to respond to in the field emergencies as they arise. The storm events of the past 2 weeks have underscored the importance of doing so. This process focused first on in the field communications with the purchase of both district-owned iPhones and iPads. 5 were purchased in total, and those are available to our CERT volunteers during an event and managed by the communications outreach and education team. The iPhones are activated for use and the iPads are in the process of being configured. Our third-party technology vendor, Eaton and Associates, has been invaluable in this process and has established a secure delivery and use model. Additionally, as this agenda item is reporting on, the purchase of laptops and associated peripherals for district staff is needed. These purchases represent an important step in establishing district-based hardware and software standards, centralizing device management, and moving away from the use of personal equipment. Specifically, the district has purchased 5 laptops and supporting peripherals, which is terminals, etc., which will be dedicated to key team members. This procurement complies with the county-approved competitive purchase process, resulting in the quote received from CDW Government, which came in most favorable. CDW Government is a leading multi-brand provider of information technology solutions to business, government, education, and healthcare customers in the US, UK, and Canada. And this purchase was made using the district managers. It was resolution number 2020 authorizing the general manager to execute certain limited agreements for goods and services for the benefit of the district and the furtherance of the district's purpose. And that's the end of my.
Thank you. Any discussion from the commission on this? Mark?
One quick question. Were any of the laptops for the staff, you know, the ruggedized version like the Toshiba Toughbooks, or are they just standard laptops? But I asked that because if our staff's going out in the field and using these in the field.
Yeah, this agenda item specifically is for the laptops for more in office,
Okay.
as I'm understanding. The previous purchase, iPads and iPhones, I wasn't part of that. So Victoria, can you speak?
Yes, we are outfitting those with the OtterBox Defender Pro Series.
Makes sense. Okay.
So yes, they're good. You can throw them off a building, basically. I mean, I'm not going to do that, sorry, but you can.
In theory you
In
could.
theory only, not to be tested.
Right. We'll take the theory. Thank you.
Great question, good answer. Any other questions from the commission? Nope. Any public comments on this item? Nope. Great, thank you. We will not, that was just I don't think any direction is needed. Thank you. That was just informational.
Informational, yeah.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 13, the commission member reports. Item 13A is an update on the 2 commissioner terms which expired on December 31st. General Manager Logan, can you please provide the update on that?
Yes, the applications have been submitted through the online submission process to the District 5 supervisor. And those applications are vetted from what I understand. No selection has been made at this point, but I do expect there to be selection at some time very soon. So that's my report as best I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion from commission on that? Sort of a no news so far report?
So we don't even know how high the interest level was?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
And just to make one comment, which is that it's possible this may be the last time after many, many years, this gentleman over here is part of this meeting. So we don't know. So depends on how the board.
Well, hold on there. He's not replaced until he's replaced.
I know, but so we don't know, but just savor every moment. I'm just telling you, because we don't know when it's going to happen. So I just want to, it's worth noting that you've been here for 10 years.
That's correct, 10 years. It's been great.
Longer than he
So there's a
the senior
strong
member.
possibility that this could be my last meeting. So I want to thank you all. It's been
The senior member has done it all. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure. I've been served on a lot of subcommittees with you, and it's been nothing but a pleasure. So I'm gonna miss that. So anyway, moving on from that. Yeah, let's see. I doubt there's any public comment on that item. No hands raised. Okay, great. Item 13B, discussion of the in-person commission hybrid meetings. We have obviously this was thrown together, this meeting here. We have an opportunity as a commission to sort of decide on how we want to move forward as a policy of meetings. My comments up here. We don't have an obligation to do hybrid meetings. I would say that, so this is an open discussion on where we want to have meetings, how we want to have meetings. Some of the rule, and I look forward to Aaron stepping in if I say anything wrong or has any information. The pre-pandemic rules for Brown Act people like ourselves was pretty hideous in terms of not being present. Having to submit notices and open the doors and all that kind of stuff. And it looks like that's changing somewhat. We don't quite know what it's going to be yet. So whether it allows us to be as virtual as the public, but as it is now, we are all here in present. We can make it, we could define that we're not going to have any hybrid and we're just going to be everything in person. In which case we still need to find a place to have meetings. I'll come back to that in a second. Or we can say we want to continue to facilitate members of the public being able to come in a hybrid fashion, and that technology has to be part of our meetings where we do them. So that's one thing for us to consider is how do we want to go forward there? And we will learn going forward what the requirements for us, whether there's any more convenient approach for us when we can't necessarily be in person. Second thing is in terms of location, we are required to meet within our district, in our jurisdiction. So we've been offered other nice places that Los Altos and so forth that are not within our jurisdiction. So it's hard to find places, and so far the town has been very kind to offer us here, both this room, assuming we have no scheduling conflicts. There are other rooms, such as the new room back there, but I don't know if that room is hybridable. It is? Okay, so we have options there, and again, the town has been very forthcoming and helpful in this, but we did want to get a chance to have a commission direction on how we want to go forward for February, so I can make a definitive statement. One possibility is to say, we like the hybrid, we'll keep trying it. I think other organizations are trying it as well, and everyone's kind of figuring out their footing on this. Or we can say, we don't want to bother with it, just everyone be in person. Just want to open up and have everyone have a chance to comment or
I'd
offer.
love to hear how hard the hybrid is for staff. If it was very complicated or pretty easy.
This was a surprisingly easy process. And I do want to just throw out that this chamber here is on reserve for us for February and March. So it is available if the commission is happy with this location, we can use it again. But it's always a learning curve, of course. But I think that we were able to arrive, and I've had plenty of help from my staffs and Deborah Padavan as well. So it was not as huge of a crisis as.
What staff can't attend if we don't go hybrid?
So the staff that would not be able to attend would be Eugenia in Colorado, possibly Russ, depending on weather, and then of course I think it's more convenient for the fire chief. It would be convenient for the county brush weed abatement manager. So sometimes when we have guests that might have multiple commitments besides just being a part of the district here, it's more convenient for them to have the hybrid capabilities.
From my point of view, this worked out really wonderful. And if you have two more like it, I think there's nothing better to say. And in addition to that, I've had a hybrid meeting in that room right there, committee meeting, and that has worked out really quite well. So from my vantage point, given the fact that some really key members of the staff are not able to be in person, I would suggest that we continue with the hybrid.
So can we offer that as the direction that staff is looking for, or unless any comments?
Yeah, so first of all, really pleased that we're actually all back to do this in person. I think it's a better experience. We're more collaborative in this environment. If we need to keep it hybrid, we need to keep it hybrid. I'd love to encourage everyone to participate in person. I think there's better human interaction that way. In terms of spaces, I really like this space. I think it provides an opportunity for the public to attend. The fire station, I think, is no longer a viable option. Our staff has grown to a point that we can't all meet there. It doesn't have the technology. And frankly, it's very hard and inaccessible for the public to get there and find it and to park. And so I find this is a much more appropriate public venue to have our meetings in.
I concur with everything. And just to say, it didn't get to this stage without some hard knocks to get to this stage here. We had a town committee, so we had a lot of actually members of the public that helped establish this thing here, and it's taken a bit to get there. So it's hard to turn on, but once it's working, it seems as though it works pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm hearing pretty consistent direction.
I'm sorry, I do want to also just, I don't know if Aaron can speak up to it, but just the Brown Act requirements for legislative bodies. Now, we're talking hybrid. This does not necessarily mean that the legislative body is able to attend. This is more hybrid for the sake of our staff and the public. But Aaron, could you speak? Yeah.
Sure, I was looking for a moment to jump in, so I appreciate that. I think the way to frame it is that another benefit of planning on having hybrid meetings is that individual commissioners can either request or appear remotely, appear by teleconference under certain conditions. So this is kind of a new post-pandemic set of Brown Act rules that allows members of a Brown Act body to appear remotely without the old requirements that they publicly post their location if they have just cause, which is a family emergency, medical reasons, or childcare reasons, or under emergency circumstances. So there still has to be a quorum appearing physically in person, but if one of those conditions are met, an individual board member can appear remotely. But you need to have, in order to have that option available, you need to have a hybrid meeting in place with options for the public to appear remotely. And the new requirements and procedures are actually fairly complicated, and they're brand new. So the county and other bodies are still figuring out how to implement them. So I'm happy to field questions if and when they come up about anyone's need to appear remotely, but putting that out there that it offers a benefit to the commission to have that in place.
Great, thank you. George.
Just my feedback from other organizations that are facing that same issue is they're generally walking away from that new, I forget, it's AB something with the new requirements, because it adds added complications, like you can only have some percent of your meetings be remote, and other things that somebody now has to administer. So I think the best opportunity for that, where you don't have the standard noticing and all, is indeed if you have an emergency of a healthcare sort of thing or something like that, not a regular ongoing, I'm going to plan on being remote all the time, because that does not work with that new format.
I would agree with that strategy. There's the kind of regularly occurring reasons are either childcare or travel related to this legislative body or another local or state agency is an appropriate cause to appear remotely. But that's right, that there are a certain percentage of the meetings that you can appear remotely at. And there are request procedures. So it's a complicated system. And the principle behind it is that the goal is for everyone to be in person.
Great, so I have a pretty consistent direction to meet here and to maintain hybrid. But I will point out that I didn't see any mistakes from this. I made more mistakes myself reading stuff here than the technology did. So that's a good sign. So I think that's all the direction we need going forward. Do we need to, I guess that we should allow for any public comment on this item?
We just want a consensus of the commission for this item, and then of course allow for public comment.
We've heard a consensus and seen a consensus, and
Great.
Any public comment on the issue of meetings?
I'm not seeing
None?
public comment.
Great, thank you. Now move on to item 13. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see, item 13C.
13C.
This is an opportunity for commissioners to provide reports on any future agenda topics. Are there any comments from the commission on that? Seeing none. Any public comment on this item about future agenda items? Seeing none. We'll move on to item 14, election of officers. Item 14A is the election of the commission president. For reasons of continuity, I am offering to continue serving as president this coming year. I can't nominate myself, and I'm open to any discussion or alternatives that you.
I'd like to run against you.
I knew you'd get on the board somehow. It has to be a second. Oh, I don't guess is there a second needed or?
I second.
Okay.
I don't believe we need a second, just someone needs to nominate, or if anybody else, give the opportunity for someone else to nominate.
Anyone else?
I would like to nominate Roger Spreen as commission president.
We have 3 nominations for me. I guess that counts.
I still have to take roll call.
Okay.
So the motion that we have is for Commissioner Spreen to continue as president for the calendar year 2023. And
actually, I guess before we do roll call, I guess I need to say, is there any discussion? Is there any public comment on this item?
None.
Okay. Then now we can vote. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct the roll call.
All right. And can President Spreen vote for himself, County Council?
I'll abstain, make it easy.
Sure, I believe all members of the commission can vote.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. President Spreen?
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock?
Yes.
Commissioner Basici?
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren. Okay, and President Spreen will continue to serve as commission president for the calendar year 2023.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we will now move on to item 14B, election of the commission vice president. I'd like to make a nomination right off the bat that Commission Vice President Sherlock continue as vice president for 2023. I will, I guess I don't need a second. I certainly welcome any relevant comments or other alternative discussion.
I am happy to continue, but if someone else would like the spot, I would certainly like to make that available also.
Let's see, any
All right.
discussion? Any public comment on this item? Okay, then we shall vote. District Clerk Vargas, please connect the roll call.
President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President Sherlock,
Yes.
Commissioner Basigi,
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren. Okay, and Vice President Sherlock will continue to serve as the commission vice president for the calendar year 2023.
Awesome, thank you. Yay. All right, item 14C is notice that the next regular commission meeting is scheduled for February 21st, 2023, to be held in person at this town hall, council chambers, with staff and members of the public. Welcome to join the meeting in person or by virtual teleconference, thanks to this hybrid meeting. Let's see, any additional comments from the commission on this meeting? This agenda?
I apologize. It looks like I have a flight that lands in San Francisco at 8:30 that evening.
Okay. Oh, on that evening? Okay. Any public comment on this item of the agenda schedule? Okay, great. So we will move on to item 15, adjournment. This concludes the January 17th, 2023 regular meeting of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District. The meeting is adjourned at whatever time, 9:07, I think is what it says. And Emergency Services Manager Beebe, please